The Czech Republic has more castles per square kilometer than any other country in Europe. True or false?
True.
In Czech business culture, punctuality is highly valued and being late is seen as disrespectful. True or false?
True.
The Czech Republic has one of the highest beer consumption rates per capita in the world. True or false?
True, unfortunately.
Hi, and welcome to ASHA Global Voices podcast. My name is Tjasa Strle, and I'm a cross-cultural leadership coach and the creator of ASHA Global Voices. Together with my guests, we are sharing stories from around the world about different cultures, leadership, and human experiences that connect us. If you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button. Your support means the world to me. And now, let's dive into today's episode.
Hi and welcome to ASHA Global Voices podcast. Today my guest is Kateřina Bendová, a financial advisor from Prague, Czech Republic. With a background in banking, insurance and education, Kateřina helps people make smart financial choices. From first mortgages to building wealth, she's on a mission to make finance more human. She also leads financial education initiatives for companies, schools, and individuals across the country. Kateřina, welcome. It's a pleasure having you here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Tjasa.
And today we will learn a lot about Czech Republic and as well about some financial education. But I would love if we first of all go through true or false statements. For all three of them, you said that they are true. And the first one was that the Czech Republic has more castles per square kilometer than any other country in Europe. So we have really a lot of castles.
Yeah, we do. Like when you want to really spend your weekends outdoors and you also like culture, you can really join these two together to make a trip and at the same time visit a castle. And I think it would pretty much make your diary full for most of the year.
Yeah, for sure. Do you maybe have any idea about how many castles we are talking about?
I never really tried to get the number, so I wouldn't be the one to ask.
Okay. Yeah, but I guess more than 100 castles, most probably.
Would need to ask ChatGPT maybe.
Yeah, I know, and Google it. Okay. And the second one was that in Czech business culture, punctuality is highly valued and being late is seen as disrespectful. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Well, I would say we are still not in Germany or in Switzerland, where people are even much more accurate than Czech people. But then again, when you compare it, let's say, to southern states, when you compare it to Spain, Italy, Portugal, countries like that, then definitely this is a difference already. And maybe for people from those countries, we are too punctual. But maybe for Germans or for Swiss people, we would be like, oh, not so, on time. So
That's a great,
what you compare it to. Yeah.
absolutely a great point that you just raised. But just to know, so for example, if we meet, if our meeting is at 9, I should arrive at 9 or maybe 2 minutes before, or at 9 would be the perfect.
No, I think like 10 minutes before is perfectly fine. And also on time is fine. And still, if it is within, I would say like 5 to 10 minutes that you are late, but you let me know that you're coming late because after 5 minutes, the person isn't here. I already picked the phone and called them if everything is okay. So then that's okay if you let the person know.
Okay. And the third one was that the Czech Republic has one of the highest beer consumption rates per capita in the world. You have to tell me more about it. And also before our podcast, you said that you are kind of lowering the percentage. Yeah, with drinking water.
I'm lowering the average for sure. Also, we talked before, and I mentioned this story that a few years ago, I used to work in Corfu for the summer in animation. And then when I would meet people there, meet the guests there, and they would ask me where I'm from. And I said, Prague, Czech Republic. I didn't get the Prague castle is beautiful, or this is beautiful, but it got the, they have very nice and cheap beer. I was like, okay, fair enough. Because I'm not so aligned with the culture, but it's true.
So you have a lot of, I've been also to Prague, you have a lot of different kind of varieties of beer, and obviously, I guess Czech people also love drinking beer.
They do, yeah. But
But
also tourists. I think when tourists come here, this is the thing that they want to try. And also Czech beer is pretty much also quite a lot exported into the world. So for a lot of people, they know Czech beer, even if they don't live in Czech Republic.
But would you say it's kind of a usual thing to go after work and have a beer with colleagues and friends?
I would say so. I would say so. Like not probably in my closest circle, but in general, yes. And it's usually this, I'll go and have one beer, which one beer is never one beer. One beer usually turns to 3, 5 or more. So yeah, it's part of that.
Okay. And so we now already established that you are from Czech Republic.
Mhm.
Could you briefly explain the difference between Czechia and the Czech Republic?
I think it's quite a big topic for Czechs because we used to call ourselves Czech Republic, I think quite a lot. And then somebody came with this, hey, it's too long and we should make it shorter. So then this Czechia name came into the play. And if you would just ask this question among a bunch of Czech people, I think there would be quite a big dispute about, part of them being like, no, it's only Czech Republic and we actually hate the name Czechia. And some of them would be like, oh, but it's more international. So I don't think we really adopted the name quite well, Czechia. And I would still say that I'm from the Czech Republic because somehow it also, tends to be mixed with different countries. So for somebody, it goes Chechnya for a completely different country, and it just gets completely mixed. And for a lot of people also from abroad, we are still Czechoslovakia, even though we're not since 1993. So it's been some time, but for some people, it's still engraved in their mind like that.
But like officially, it should be appropriate that I would kind of say that you are from Czechia. Is this like the official name now, or we can use Czechia or Czech
I
Republic?
think both of them.
Yeah, I think as well. I think I Googled it, but yeah, interesting. Thank you for elaborating this. And what would you say? What three words would you use to best describe Czech people? Like what comes to mind?
You know what? This is an interesting question because it's like when you ask fish to describe what water is like, and the fish lives in the water, right? And it's everything that you know. Like, for sure, what I would say is that we tend to be more reserved before we get to know somebody. And all the other things that come to my mind are kind of connected to that. Like, not trust people so much on the first meeting, be a little, reserved, keeping a distance a little bit more. I would say outdoorsy in a way, not necessarily meaning that people would, like everybody would go hiking or biking or something, but we definitely have a lot of cottages here. And this is kind of the culture that it's not like everybody nowadays, but you could say like everybody has a place where they live and then they have a cottage where they go for the weekends. So it's more about also, having garden there and doing, I don't know, grilling and whatever, but it's really going outside of the towns if they live in towns. So definitely that. And I would say also, people who can be very sarcastic in a way, and the sarcasm and the jokes really help us get over difficult things in our lives, be it personal things or be it even things that have an impact on the whole republic, whole nation. This is the way how to overcome the obstacles or the negative mood.
Really interesting. Thank you for sharing this. And you mentioned at the beginning that Czechs could be described as a little bit reserved at the beginning. What comes to mind if I ask you what would make you feel comfortable as someone from Czech when we first meet? For example, how should I behave that you would feel kind of comfortable in my company?
I would say don't be too loud. Like for some people, some nations that are super expressive and very loud and very like even loud with the gestures, that might be a little okay. What does she want from me? So probably that. And then I think it also changes with the age of the people, because older people will be more reserved and they also have, some of the memories, more of the history, and they are not so well traveled. So for young people, they would be much more open, even with knowing the language, being able to speak English, that for sure changes. Yeah, this like not being like too loud and too much interpersonal space, I think would be one of them.
Okay. And what would you say, how does this being a little bit more reserved at the beginning shows up in business life? Does that mean that we have to kind of meet a couple of times just to get to know each other a bit more and to start trusting each other before we maybe work or collaborate together? Or what would you say?
Maybe the best way to describe it, because I work mainly with expats, and they're 70 to 80% of my clients are expats. And then when Czech people come as clients, I can feel that they are a little bit more reserved. And I can feel that they really need more time to, like, for me to gain their trust. So you suddenly feel this like wall, sometimes it's big and sometimes it's very thick and sometimes it's thinner, but it's still like you can feel it there. And the initial distrust in terms of, okay, so what do you want from me? They have kind of this. So this is something to overcome in the beginning. So probably yes. I think it's a little different for me because I tend to find it very easy to start talking to new people and, making people feel comfortable when they talk to me, even the Czech ones. So I think it's a little different for me, but probably the time helps for sure. And some like continuity and this, okay, so this happened once, and then for the second time I still have the positive experience, and third time I have positive experience, and really gaining the trust like that.
Okay, great advice. So it takes time to build trust. And also it's super interesting to hear your perspective, as we didn't said it yet on this podcast, but you mainly, as you mentioned, work with international clients from Asia, South America, USA, and different parts of Europe. But you are originally from Czech, and you also traveled and work in different countries, and you see yourself as a kind of a global citizen. So it's really interesting then to also see your perspective nowadays when you work with Czechs. So thank you for sharing this. And tell me, how do Czechs typically greet each other in social and professional situations? So tell us first how you greet with kind of your friends or acquaintances, and then how it is appropriate in business setting.
Do you mean the words that we use, or even like the handshakes, and things like that?
Both.
Okay. So when it's for somebody who is your friend or somebody that you know, it would be ahoy, the word. Sometimes, foreigners use it automatically. And it's a little bit different here because like in English, you really don't make so much of a difference if somebody is superior or a friend or somebody, and you still use the first names, right? Very often. Whereas in Czech, you use first names with people who you know and who are your friends, maybe who are family. Me, I use it even with Czech people very often because, since working with foreigners, I'm used to using first names. So I still use this. I don't know how you call it in English, really. It's a different form of the verb that I use, but I still use the first name. I find it much easier. So you would say ahoy for a friend. You would say dobrý den for somebody that is in a professional setting, or somebody that you meet for the first time, or when you come to a shop, when you come to a bus, all these situations. So you definitely use that. And then definitely a handshake. For friends, it can be a hug. Sometimes it's this kiss on the cheeks for friends. So I think that really depends, how close you are with somebody.
Yeah, it's similar to Slovene, I would say. Also, I understand ahoy. Not that we use it, but I know the word. And then dobrý dan, we say dober dan, similar, which is more official in business settings,
It is,
or
for sure.
if you
Yeah.
meet someone new. And tell me, how important is to know Czech if you work with Czechs or if you live in Czech Republic?
It is good if you try at least. Like Czech is said to be one of the most difficult languages to learn altogether. I think also because of the pronunciation, our famous r, so that's usually difficult, and then all the declinations, and like it's not an easy language to learn, but we definitely do appreciate when you try. So even for somebody who cannot really speak fluently, but even tries to pop in a few Czech words, and they say prosím when they order in a restaurant, or they, say dobrý den when they meet you, it also helps. Not that you would need it in all the settings, but it's just nice. I think it's polite, and it's the same thing that I try to do when I travel. I went to Portugal half a year ago, and I made sure to at least learn the please, thank you, hello, maybe 3-4 words. And then when I was speaking to some locals, I asked them, okay, so how do you say this in Portuguese? Like you're welcome or something like that. And they also, felt really good that I'm interested. And I think it works wherever you go. So it's good to try, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. It makes you also seen as more curious about their culture and that you're trying, as you mentioned. And what would you say, is Czech communication style more direct or indirect? Maybe especially also when it comes to giving feedback.
Oh, I think that there's definitely very indirect very often. Also, it's not very welcome in a lot of settings to be really direct. And you kind of learn, let's say, even in a job setting, that when you are too direct and when you tell your opinion, it's not that welcome as a feedback. So with time, very often people learn to just sit back and say, oh, whatever, like nothing will change anyway. So I would say that happens quite a lot.
Okay, so
Especially in corporate world, that's a big thing. But I think also, very often, even between friends or in, personal relationships, it's not this direct approach or, the Southern-like way of really expressing all the emotions. But it's more of this reserved, okay, I'm not talking to you right now. So I would say that is more of that. But then again, it depends on every person.
okay. So yeah, often in corporate they don't express because it's not so appreciated. But tell me, like, how would you give a negative feedback? Would you go straight in or would you start talking around before delivering negative feedback or critical feedback, let's say? Let's put it
You know
like this.
what? It depends on also my expectation of the reaction of that given person. Especially when you have some experience with that person already and you know that you need to go a little bit around and, say, hey, Tjasa, just so you know, I wanted to, open with you something. And then maybe you start with the positive, like, I really appreciate that you came on time and this and that happened. And then you continue with that. Sometimes when it's something that you need to address at the moment, I don't know, like somebody steps on your foot, right? You don't care like about the way how you address it because their foot is on your foot. So you'll be very direct. So it definitely also depends on the recipient.
And how would you describe the typical, let's say, leadership or management style in Czech Republic? More top-down or collaborative?
I would say top down, and it starts in the school already and in the families. And I would say it's becoming more on the same level. And you can see it even with parents and their kids. And I think we were trying to find the balance. And that brings us in the beginning into the other extreme. For example, when you see parents and their kids, sometimes it feels like the roles are completely reversed, which, if you have a 3-year-old and it's -5 outside, he doesn't quite have the right to, say, hey, I will wear my swimsuit today because you are the one who should know more. So we're trying to balance it, but definitely like in the corporate, I would say it's still more like that. But in some settings, it tends to go more level to level. And for example, in my job and in the team that I am part of, it was really, really important for me to have the setting where we all are kind of at the same level. Of course, we have different responsibilities and different options when it comes to certain things. But it's pretty much, being able to come to anybody in the company and say, hey, I need help with that, or I have this suggestion. And this works really well for me. So that's why also the corporate world didn't really work for me that much. because it's like, oh, it's the person above your level, so you cannot talk to them directly. I'm like, well, that's,
I understand. So still, the corporate world is quite hierarchical, and you speak
I would
to.
say so. I
Okay.
would say so. But like to to some level, it is necessary, because the person who is in the higher position has more responsibilities and also sees the bigger picture. So there needs to be some level of more like directive approach. But then it's also different if you have like a junior person in the company or if you have a senior person. So it
Sure,
kind
and
of
it
should
also
be
depends
universal.
on the size of the company and things like that.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. And tell me, I know at the beginning you mentioned that you were in Corfu, so in Greece, and tourists were asking you about Czech beer, which we might say that it's also a stereotype, or would you agree with me?
Well, it's a stereotype into some degree, but then when you see the statistics, then unfortunately this one is
Not.
true, right?
Yes. So tell me, what's one stereotype then about Czech people that you feel it's outdated or just plain wrong?
It's a good question. I don't know if I can think about one of them, but maybe I say a story again. I was in a setting with a group of expats, and they were very much not happy with some stereotypes that are told about them. Like Spanish people are like that, and Americans are like that, and these things. And then they kept talking, and after like an hour, I had to raise my voice, and I was like, "Hey, did you realize that you do the same thing that you don't like to be done to you?" Because they were like, all Czechs are like that, all Czechs are like this. And they were like, oh, you're right. So it kind of like happens automatically. And sometimes you even see it in some of the expat forums. It's like this, hey, are all Czech people like that? And sometimes it comes from one experience with one Czech person, and it becomes a generalization, which I think is the biggest problem. So not quite sure if I can think about just one particular thing. But like in general, like maybe try to be open. I know also a lot of people say, hey, like the Czech client service sucks, and this sucks, and that sucks. And I'm like, well, first of all, you take you, everybody, everywhere, you take you with you. So sometimes you can see the people, or you can hear from the people who say, oh, I never had an experience like that. And then there are people who experience this everywhere they go. So it's sometimes also like a personal thing. Yeah.
A great point that you raised, right? I think stereotypes are universal also, as you mentioned, and it's great to have an open mind and to have awareness, not to generalize if possible or be stereotypical about different cultures.
Well, you know what? Maybe also try to understand a little bit about where it comes from. Because even the fact that we talked about in the beginning of Czechs being reserved, it has some historical background. And it's really nice, when you meet some expats who live here and they say, hey, I read through the history of Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia before, and I know this, and that happened. And it helped me understand the point of view of the people a little bit more. And I think this helps, because when you know where it's coming from, it's also easier to say, and this is the way to either overcome it or even accept that it is what it is, because you're coming into a different culture. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't really require for some things to be different, but it's still coming to a different culture. And it's like when you come to somebody for a visit and you would start redecorating their flat, and you'd be like, are you for real? You don't live here, right? So it's good to be a little like sensitive, or not like be this elephant in the room, but just be gentle with the people, with the process.
Absolutely beautifully put. We should all be open and curious when coming to another culture. It also instantly changes our energy and how we are towards others. And it helps us also to learn faster and be, as you mentioned, more empathetic and sensitive, which is always helpful. Thank you for sharing this. And tell me, what should someone not do when working with Czech colleagues?
Okay. Just thinking about that. You know what? I'm not sure how to respond to this one.
At the beginning,
I would rather say, because I see it from the maybe other perspective, because what I heard from some people was that, let's say there is a team where most of the people are Czech speaking, and then they have one foreigner, and then they, keep speaking in English in the professional setting, and then everybody goes on lunch and everybody speaks Czech. So that I would say is from the other side, but I think it's something that is good to say, because you still want to, make the people feel included and feel welcome. So definitely that. Yeah, maybe we're still coming to the same, of like whenever somebody starts to isolate and you start creating these like English speaking islands within the Czech society and just start, doing everything separately, that can also be not seen as something that is welcome. So maybe like try to, and on the other hand, sometimes you just like don't fit in maybe the culture of the team or of the company. And then I understand that it's difficult and you like try to fit in and then they don't welcome you. And it's like this never ending story. But yeah, also find whatever works for you, because even as being Czech, I would say I wouldn't thrive in the like stereotypical Czech background or groups within the work market. So I'm also looking for like my circle of people.
yeah, for sure. And you have such also global experiences and everything. But then, of course, it's helpful to know the language. I also hosted a podcast with Amanda, who is originally, and you know her, she's from Croatia, and she moved to Czech. And she also mentioned that at the beginning she was spending time more with Croatians and expats, but then, kind of she consciously decided to spend more time with Czech people because it also helped her to learn the language better and just to create a different circle as well, living in another country. But yeah, at the beginning, I remember you said that maybe because Czechs are in general a bit more reserved, so it wouldn't be really maybe the best first impression to be too expressive, too loud, too expressive as well with gestures and things like that. So maybe something that we can keep in mind. I know you also mentioned that maybe sometimes if there is a group of Czechs, business colleagues, when they go to lunch, they will speak in Czech, even though maybe you're a foreigner and don't know the language, which I guess it might happen also in different countries, because sometimes it's just easier to speak in your mother tongue. Maybe it's even unconscious a little bit. We are not paying so much attention. But still, I want to ask you, is there anything else that comes to mind that foreigners might be surprised by when living or doing business in Czech Republic?
I had this talk with a friend of mine who works with foreigners a lot, and she mentioned that the fact that people are not really smiling in the street or when you come somewhere, they're generally not that warm on the first contact. So that's something that I would say surprises people and that they don't feel so good about. But on the other hand, it's even like when the other person is not smiling, just bring your smile into the situation. It may change a lot.
When you have a beautiful smile, I have to mention.
Yeah, it even happens to me, I come to the settings and maybe the people are not in the mood. And sometimes it's like, like everybody has the right to not be in the mood. That's maybe like one part of that, to accept it. But on the other hand, when I come to people and I say, hey, I really love your glasses, even like to the shopkeeper or, to somebody that I don't know personally, or you tell them how you appreciate their service, it completely changes their mood, like instantly, really brings the smile on their face. And these are some of the things that can be different. And even for me as a Czech person, sometimes going by the public transport, that you see everybody has this like poker face and staring into their phones. It doesn't feel good, even for me. But then again, when you have the chance that you can really bring like your positivity into the situation.
I love that advice. So we shouldn't be kind of taken aback if we go to Czech Republic and people are maybe not smiling that much. It depends from which country we are coming. as well based on the culture. So we should take initiative, be proactive, and maybe smile. And this is also how we can create connections with Czech.
You know what? On the other hand, the thing is that you will know in a way like what the person thinks about you. You know, again, this maybe it's a stereotype, maybe not. But when you talk about let's say people from America, everybody has this smile on their face, right? Even if they're angry, even if they're sad, even if whatever, it's like, I'm doing great, I'm doing great. And then sometimes, people also say about Czechs, like they are not smiling all the time, but at least they're honest. So
Absolutely, also depends. That's why we are also having, or I'm hosting this podcast, and it's always great to hear from you, my guest, about nuances between us. We were born somewhere, as you also said before. Each country has history, culture, and it also affects us to a certain degree. So as well, how much we are smiling, how much we are direct in our communication. So we are not here to judge what is good or bad. We are here to learn and be curious to better understand each other. This is kind of the goal of this podcast. And I would also love it if all of us, like humans globally, would adopt this mindset of just being curious, not judgmental, but curious. Okay, and tell me, we mentioned before that you are working internationally with people from all around the globe, but you are originally from Czech. Even though you have been shaped by so many influences globally, which also kind of changed your mindset and who you are. But still, I want to ask you if something comes to mind. What would you say? Is there one cultural trait or something that you kind of carried into your international work by being Czech?
I never thought about it like that. I would say it's still really the things that you mentioned in the beginning from the professional point of view, like the punctuality is something that just stays with you and that this is something that should be present. But then a lot of it also comes from your upbringing, from what values your family gave to you. And my aunt, who I spent quite some time with when I was small, she's well-traveled. So she would tell me about all her travels and about the people from different countries. And at the same time, she's a person who really loves all these societal rules of like how you give hands and how you say hello and how you look into the person's eyes and how you behave in a restaurant and a cafe and a museum and whatever. So I think a lot of that is also adopted, from the family. So yeah, probably this would be something that I take with me. But then it's really nice, like especially for me, meeting people from all over the world. It shapes you and you really become like very flexible in a good way, because it's really different people that sit across the table from you, and you just get this mix from different influences, from different cultural backgrounds.
For sure, you became more adaptable and kind of fluid, as you mentioned. Thank you for sharing this. And tell me, what's one key difference you've noticed when working with international clients from regions that we kind of mentioned before, like the European Union, Asia, US, Latin America? Um, Give me whatever comes to mind, be it mindset, expectations, or even approach to money.
To money is probably one that is good to start with. And you can see the difference there, that when I speak to especially Americans, for them, investing and talking about money is something that comes off much easier because it's something that everybody talks about and everybody is used to that. Whereas, and especially in Central Europe, there were not so many options due to the communist regime, how to deal with money, what to do with that. So for us, it's still something that's very fresh and new, and we're a little afraid about of that, and we're not sure how to approach it. So probably that would be different. But then this again depends on the family upbringing of every person. And you mentioned also in the beginning that I also do some lectures in schools, in primary schools, basically. And recently, the one that I did, you could really see that the parents nowadays already talk more to the kids about money, about the money management, about budgeting, about, you know, the money mindset. So it's much more open, and that's not so much really anymore country related. It's more of like the culture all over the world, I think, has changed in that. And then as for the other things, it's really so difficult to, you know, name one difference, because the only thing that the people that I work with have in common is that they are all expats who live here in Czech Republic. And the second one is that they all speak English. And the rest is very individual.
But you gave a great example, I think. So that, for example, Central Europe still has a bit more taboo around finances, even though, as you mentioned, we are all getting more awareness, more financial education at the end. And if you have more financial education, then you also feel more comfortable talking about finances, which was a great comparison to, for example, clients from the US, and the difference that you pointed out. And you also say that you call yourself a financial advisor who speaks human. I'm curious, what does that mean?
I used to teach English for 6 years before I returned to the financial world, because I used to work in a bank, and then I did a variety of jobs, and then I used to teach English for 6 years, and I taught English to 1-year-olds to 14-year-olds. So this is pretty much, you know, talking to kids. So I think that already made a difference. And the thing is that they say when you understand something, you should be able to explain it to a 5-year-old. So I really try to keep the way that I talk about finance very easy and understandable, without difficult words, difficult phrases. And I also very often use, I always forget the word in English, but it's basically I explain the rules of the financial world on the like everyday things that everybody knows. So when we all talk about risks when financing, I will talk about risks when you drive a car, and about how you try to protect yourself, and then make this comparison, you know, how it works here and there, because it's so much easier for people to grasp the concept, because very often the topics that we don't feel very comfortable with is because we don't understand them. And then once you put it into simple terms, the fear is gone, and you're like, oh, okay, so this is fine. You know, it's like me when I drive a car. I know how to come from A to B. I know how to do the petrol thing. I know the difference between summer tires and winter tires, and that's it. So when I come to my technician, he starts to explain to me the things in big words. I'm like, does it need a change or not? And he's like, yes. Okay, how much will it cost? This and that. Will it be original, or will it be like a secondhand something, right? He says secondhand. I'm like, okay, this is that. I understand. Now I know. So it's really talking in the language that is easy to understand, because it doesn't have to be overly complicated. And you don't really have to become like a master of financial world or whatever. For a lot of people, it's just about this, you know, I can come from A to B, and I know why I do that, and I know how to steer the steering wheel just in the world of finance, and that's it. I don't have to understand like every single part that is in the car.
I love that. Sounds like a great approach. I also kind of use it in my work. So simple wording so that everybody can understand also eases down the kind of overwhelm of learning something new. Yeah, thank you for sharing this. And tell me, why do you think financial literacy is still so overlooked? I know you mentioned before, yes, parents are also having more awareness, teaching kids more. You even have workshops in the primary school, which is totally fantastic. We didn't have that. But still, what would you say? Why is it still overlooked?
I think one part of that is that we still, in quite a lot of countries, I would say, especially around Europe, I don't know about the whole world, we still live in this belief of the state, like the government, will take care of us. So it's the whole social system that maybe used to work in a way for our grandparents and our parents, and we take it for granted And it's even like here in Czech Republic. The thing is that a lot of people will say public healthcare is free in the Czech Republic. But kind of like the people who say that, they never really looked at the pay slip. Because in the pay slip, you would see the before tax and after social tax and after healthcare tax. This is something that we take for automatic. So we only see this, hey, when I come to the doctor, I don't give him anything. So that means it is for free. So it's also a lack of awareness. And that, I think, is an important part of what the financial advisor should also do for you, is to make you aware of what the situation really looks like. And it's usually until something happens, you think that everything is fine. Right? It's like, what could happen? I will not even fasten my seatbelt because, I just go around the block until something happens. So that's, I think, one part of that. And also the thing is that it isn't really pushed that much, even from the government, which like they do changes and they give you tax deductions and they give you some state benefits, which should indicate that they don't do it because they are so kind, but they do it because they want to prepare you for something. But the way it's communicated is not quite straightforward and clear. So it's definitely part of that. And even the teachers in schools, I talked to some teachers in the primary school, and they are actually supposed to have some financial literacy classes, but it's difficult for a teacher who themselves maybe have some money in the savings account, and that's it, to teach kids about financial literacy, and they don't know how to do it. And I talked to one teacher like that, and she said, like we don't really, the kids are not interested in that, so we don't do it. And it should be part of this subject where you learn the skills for like everyday living. So they, cook the food and they bake the cakes and do things like that. And then I talked to this teacher. I'm like, so do you do these like Christmas markets or something? She's like, yeah, we do. And do you bake things and then you sell them in the Christmas markets? And she's like, yeah, we do that. I'm like, well, you can actually make financial literacy part of that, because if you ask the kids, okay, so we will sell gingerbreads, whatever, and you can ask them, okay, so how much would you want to sell it for? And the kid tells you, 10 crowns, 20 crowns, whatever. And then you can actually make them go to the shop and do the shopping with you, and they do the math, and they will know we spent this and this much for that. And then you can help them figure out, and we spend this much time on that, and we spend this much electricity. And then all of this resulted into us having 30 gingerbreads. And then maybe they will realize that they are selling it underpriced. So it's really just like making them part of that. And even for parents, I think they overcomplicate it sometimes. And you can easily take an 8-year-old, 10-year-old, give them 500 and tell them, hey, go shop for the family lunch. And then they realize, this is the value of the money, because they start putting the things in their cart and they're like, oh, okay, so this we cannot take, and we need to take less of this and maybe more of that. And they start to look at, okay, this is on discount. So it's really to make it a part of practical life. And you can even start with very small kids. When you have kids who cry at the checkout because, I want this chocolate and I want this and that. And if you actually start giving them pocket money, even the small kids, but if you give them a 100 banknote, they're like, okay, piece of paper, nice. They don't understand the value of that. But if you give them 10 crown coins, they see they have 10 pieces of something. And when they want to buy the chocolate, they will have 6 pieces of something because the 4 pieces are gone. And this gives them much more perspective. And this is something that they can understand. They will not understand what is an hour. But if you tell them, hey, it's an equivalent of 5 episodes of Peppa the Pig. Okay, this is something that they understand. So it's really to just make them part of that. And often you hear in the families, you're too small for that, and we don't talk about money in the house. And actually, when you just like stop making it a top secret, like a CIA level secret, what happens with the money, they will learn. And I even heard about parents who gave their kids pocket money, and they would actually, let's say they give them 100 of whatever euro, I don't know, for somebody bigger. And then they take 25 of that, 25 euro, and they say, this is your tax. This is the money that we use for running the household. And then they take other 25 and they give it into their savings account because they teach them how to save. And the 50 is something that the kid can work with. And then the girl whose parents did this, she said, when I received my first salary, I wasn't surprised by that. I wasn't surprised by the difference of the number that is the brutto, the before tax, and the after tax, because my parents did the same. So I knew part of that goes for the tax and part of it goes for the savings. And I knew how to live with 50% of what was written in the beginning. So it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It's just like part of normal life. And you don't even have to like explain to the kids that much. It's more of, because kids don't learn really by you giving them lectures, right? That's already, and like, okay, da-da-da, 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 and a song is playing in their mind. But if you just do the things and you take them along, this is how they learn.
Such great examples. I couldn't agree more. Learning by doing, right? Through experiences. No, but yeah, we, our parents in general, should have financial literacy first, right? And feel comfortable around it so that they can also transfer it then to children easier. And I know that many people find finances overwhelming or emotionally charged. And tell me, how do you help clients feel more confident and calm when dealing with money matters?
First of all, I think you need to find somebody who really talks the language of your tribe in a way. And it's perfectly fine. It's the same when you have a doctor, you have your GP. It should be somebody where you feel comfortable. So I would say don't hesitate to really find the person who speaks in a way that speaks to you and where you feel safe. Definitely, like look for that. And the way we do it is that I first need to really understand where the client is, what they're doing with the money already, how they think about it, and to really have the real interest in getting to know them, getting to know their life story, and be there for whatever they need. Because when we start talking about your dreams, about what you want for yourself, and this will be really your dreams and your journey and the goals that you want to achieve, then the how to do it comes a second. And I think even just having somebody who you feel, and it can be in any setting, it can be in the financial world, it can be with your doctor, it can be with the teacher. If you feel that the people are really interested in hearing your story, and then they don't diminish it and they don't say, this is so stupid, why do you think like that? But they try to understand your perspective. It suddenly like calms down your nervous system, right? So this, I would say, is the first step. And even, having enough time for that. Because when I talk to clients, what I do is that we first have a video call, like an introduction one, where we talk for 20, 30 minutes just to figure out where we are and what they need from me and if I can offer it to them. And I always feel that this already creates more trust, because then when the person comes for an in-person meeting, they already saw me, they already know how I speak. I know what they're coming with, so definitely that. And then for the first meeting, we always have 90 minutes for the meeting. So we are not rushing anywhere. We're not, 20 minutes and let's do this and that. And we don't sign anything on the first meeting. It's not like, your signature here. I really try for them to understand and be part of the decision-making process.
Sounds fantastic. And tell me, if I would ask you, probably a challenging one, but still, what would you say is one piece of financial advice you think everybody should follow?
It's never too late to start, I would say. Because, I meet clients who are in their 40s and they're like, I never started and I should have when I was 20 and it doesn't, make sense anymore. And they have, the longer you postpone something and the longer you put it on the back burner, then sometimes like the worse you feel. And it's just, the best time to start maybe was a year ago or something, but the second best time to start is today. So just, find the courage. And if you're not sure what you're doing, and if you're overwhelmed with things and there's a lot of information, it's not a problem that there wouldn't be enough information. But the problem that I feel is that sometimes it's too much. Like, even if you want to change the nutrition, right, for yourself, and you're like, well, you open the internet, or you should do keto, and you should do vegan, and you should do vegetarian, and you should do meat only, and you should do veggies only, and you should do raw. It's too much. And it can be very overwhelming. And it's really fine to find a person who you trust and who you understand. Because I think that sometimes we feel that since, like, we all have money, we earn money in a way, we have the, debit cards and credit cards in our phones and in our watch and in the wallet, we feel that we should understand. And it's the same with relationships, right? We should know how to be married. We should know how to solve disputes. But a lot of people, like, when you really talk to the people, a lot of people will tell you, oh, I'm on the same boat. I don't know either. And you're not the only ones, and sometimes when I talk to clients and they hear me and I tell them, like, I maxed out 2 credit cards in the past, so I know what it's like, and I have been there. And they're like, oh, okay. And they suddenly stop feeling bad. And it's just because, we don't really talk about it that often. And then we feel that everybody, except for us, has their things together.
Great, and great that you put it out there for all of us, and advice to remember that good day is to start today. Fantastic. Kateřina, it's been such a pleasure. We are coming to an end of this podcast, and I have one last final question that I ask all of my guests, and the question goes like this. If you could imagine a better world to live in, what would that look like for people globally?
It brought me to this trend on Instagram where it says, we listen and we don't judge.
And it's a great one. Also, we were discussing it kind of in between of this podcast. So we listen and we don't judge. I love that, Kateřina. Thank you so much for everything that you shared about Czech Republic, about Czech culture, and of course about what you do as a financial advisor. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the very best on your future journey.
Thank you for having me, Tjasa, and also all the best for your podcast and for the future episodes to come.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.